But mine is here.
Okay, welcome everybody. At 6:30. This is a joint meeting with Town of Farmington and Town of Victor. Meeting with Victor Farmington volunteer ambulance folks and talking about their request to both towns for the money they'd like to see in the 2023 budget. So, Jim, if you can introduce everybody and get started.
Thank you. My name is Jim Hood. I'm president of Victor Farmington Volunteer Ambulance. We have Deputy Chief Palmer with us and a couple of our board members, Suzanne McCaffrey and Dave. Everyone else. So thank you very much, Supervisor and Supervisor Mayer as well. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to be able to go over our proposed budget for the next fiscal year. There we go. So looking back at 2022, we had a budget of just over $2 million, and each town contributed $150,000 toward our overall budget. And you may recall we set some goals for 2022. Our primary goals were focused on having manpower to be able to answer calls. So we were focused on benefits and compensation. We had merit-based wage increases in January of last year that averaged 12%. We added a new 401k with 6% matching. And just recently, given some of the additional wage pressures that we've been feeling, particularly for our basic life support providers, we had a BLS wage increase this month. We've hired 10 personnel, 7 EMTs and 3 paramedics over the last year. And we've been maintaining our staff full-time and part-time. I have a staff of 40. So we were able to achieve all of our goals for 2022. Just go ahead, Jack. Did you have
No, thank you.
So just taking a quick look at some of our high-level metrics year to date. Our call volume, and this year to date is up through the end of August. Our call volume is up in both towns. We have actually 100 additional calls this year through August 31st compared to 2021. And you can see the increase in volume, 32 additional calls in Victor, that's up almost 4%. A whopping 68 additional calls in Farmington, up almost 10%, for an average increase for our district of 6.3%. And that's just year to date. So we're going to see what happens here in the last quarter or so of the year. With the retention and the employee package that we have, we've been able to maintain our call coverage at an average of about 95%. And our response times are all excellent, much better than the NFPA standard for rural ambulance agency. So we're very proud of our metrics. One of the other things that we decided to do this year, with all of the growth that's going on and the dynamic change going on in the community, Victor Farmington has partnered with Fitch & Associates, which is a nationally renowned consulting agency, to do a complete third-party assessment of our operations. We think we do a pretty good job, but it's always good to get that outside view and that expertise. We anticipate the study will be complete year-end or early next year. Our objectives are, first of all, the benchmark. Where are we? How are we performing against national standards for other districts similar to ours? Identify areas where we're doing great and areas where we can improve. And most importantly, inform our growth strategy from a staffing standpoint, capital investment standpoint. What should we be doing over the next 5 years to be ahead of, to lead the change that we're seeing in the towns? I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. We're not sitting in 2 towns that are static right now. They're very dynamic, they're growing, and we really want to lead the change. So we're investing in our community's future. As I said here, our goal is to be prepared to continue providing responsive, cost-effective, clinically sophisticated emergency medical service to support the community's rapid growth.
And that's definitely, we're at least the 3rd year in a row now that we're 100 plus new homes in Farmington. Next year, it'll be that and more, because we have an 88 unit apartment complex going in over stages, plus regular single family homes. So it's not slowing up for 2023.
Yeah, one of the things we just learned, our chiefs meet with Thompson Hospital regularly because we do a lot of business with Thompson. We just learned that Thompson Hospital is planning on opening a new primary care facility in Farmington. They said they've seen growth of over 3,000 families in Farmington. So they're seeing enough business to open up a new facility. So that's of interest to us, but that's also another indicator of the things that you're addressing, Supervisor.
Correct.
So we want to be ahead of this change. We don't want to run into a situation where we're not able to provide the service that you need to because significant growth is happening. And as you saw, like a 10% growth rate, that could double our call volume in the next 6 or 7 years. Budget pressures. These are probably going to sound familiar. This is a lot of what you probably hear in the community from everyone, but inflation's been a big hitter for us. Victor Farmington committed to our 2021 budget in the middle of 2021 with the towns before we started seeing that very large increase in inflation. So we've taken essentially 2 years of inflationary hit on our budget that we need to account for. Fuel, we've already exhausted our fuel budget for the year. We exhausted the fuel budget in July. The additional, I actually was looking at the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics that fuel prices are up something like 48% from 2020 to 2022. Fuel is a biggie. Overtime, we spent a lot on overtime this year. As I mentioned, we're continuing to see wage pressures both from in and out of industry. We're seeing more competition within the industry where other ambulance agencies are raising their rates to try to retain or attract employees. And we're still seeing asymmetric competition, particularly at the BLS level where our wages are lower, where a Walmart or a big box store or a fast food restaurant can offer a wage to somebody that's competitive with what we're offering. Medicare and Medicaid rates have been severely lagging. They don't track the rate of inflation. So the percentage of our calls that we get that are Medicare and Medicaid patients, that gap between what it costs us to run the call and what we're getting from Medicare and Medicaid is widening. And we're at a point now where we're starting to see some preliminary indicators that call volume may be going up faster than revenue generation. In other words, more people are calling 911, but not necessarily taking the ambulance or paying for the ambulance. So you start getting this divergence between we're getting more calls, but we're not necessarily getting as much more money as we're getting more calls. So our budget proposal for 2023, we have a proposed budget of about $2.5 million, just shy of 2.5, $2,477,793. And based on the discussions we've had with both supervisors, both last year and this year in our working groups, we understood that the towns kind of want to chip away at the growth. So we've requested a $250,000 contribution from each town. So that's about 10% of the budget from each town. The other 80% is made up mostly of billing from Victor Farmington. The goals for this year, as I said, pretty straightforward. We need to be prepared for the growth that we're seeing. Good healthy growth in Victor at about that 3.6% rate. Scary growth in Farmington at a 10% rate. We want to be ahead of that, and we want to be able to make sure we provide call coverage. So the major proposal this year for that town funding is last year we used the town funding to make sure we could go to 2 full crews 5 days a week. This year we're incrementally requesting that we go to 2 full crews 7 days a week. One of the other things that we want to do to try to help with overtime expenses is replace some of our part-time staff with full-time staff to not have to pay that overtime premium. So we're also proposing hiring 2 additional full-time staff. And then the other goal, of course, is just to maintain our response times. We currently have crews, when we have 2 crews on, there's one at our base on East Victor Road and one at Victor Fire. As part of the study that we're doing, we're talking to the consultant and starting to build a view toward how do we increase our presence in Farmington, again, particularly with the growth that's going on there. Don't see an issue with our statistics right now, but as this rapid growth is occurring, we really have the sense that we need to start looking to start getting that second or that third crew out in Farmington in the not so distant future. So we need town funding to support being ahead of this growth curve. So next steps, we've got the Victor budget meetings coming up in October, the Farmington budget meetings coming up in October, and we would propose having a contract signed in December. That will support our business needs to make sure that we have everything we need to plan our year and assure our residents of continued high quality EMS care in our community. What questions can I answer for you?
Well, first of all, I apologize for the being the wrong dates,
Okay,
but you're on for Monday, September 19th,
okay,
next Monday.
I apologize. I should have checked with you.
Yeah, no problem. And the other question I have is that picture of the new ambulance or the old ambulance?
That is the new ambulance in the Farmington Fire Parade this year.
Right. I was thinking maybe you put the old one in there, and then you tell the board that, hey, this is the reason we really need the money, not the new ambulance. So I know where you're coming from. We meet with Jared once a month. The other fire departments. Board members, any questions?
Jim, you mentioned overtime, and so I assume we can assume it's trending over last year then,
Yes,
and based on the call volumes driving that.
Yeah.
You mentioned hiring 2 additional full-time staff to improve the call coverage and lower costs, but you want to go from 5 days to 7 days with 2 crews. So is that just really going to be a Band-Aid on the overtime? Is it really going to resolve it?
the going to 7 days is less Band-Aid on the overtime and more to make sure we have good call coverage. So our call coverage statistics are very good right now, but we're starting to sense that we're having crews that are taking a lot of back-to-back calls. We're having more days where both crews are taking back-to-back calls. And we're starting to get to the point where there's a real risk that we're going to start getting that third call or that second call when we don't have 2 crews up. And we're not going to be able to cover the calls. And instead of a 95% call coverage, we're going to start seeing a decrease. I mean, just last weekend, we had 1.5 crews up and had one of our volunteers not come in to cover, we would have dropped 3 calls.
And it's a scary thing with some of the other ambulance quarters that can't make their calls.
So our mutual aid numbers are indicative of stress in the system. We are seeing, I forget the exact number, Jared, it was like 130 requests for mutual aid, an additional 130 requests for mutual aid this year.
The county has changed their dispatching procedures where they're not going to tone an ambulance and see if they can get a response. I mean, they used to, some of the more rural ambulances, they would send the tones out and their policy was to wait a couple of minutes for a response. They're just not doing it. Especially if they know that there's not a crew working. So, because it's people that when people call 911, they expect police, fire, and ambulance to show up.
Yes.
And fire department, the police department for sure, and the ambulances, there's severe staffing shortages. They're going to start affecting those call outs and the response to them.
I mean, the challenges we're talking about in terms of manpower, fuel, and labor, we're not wrong.
Right. Any questions from the public?
Jim, if you could clarify for me, currently, when we say currently, we have 2 crews 24/7. So we have overnight Monday through Friday. Do we have an second overnight crew? Or is this daytime we're talking about?
Jared, could you help me with this?
Yeah, currently it's based off staffing. Right, so we have the ability to do it for staffing and staffing 5 days a week. We're meeting that probably 75%.
So from like the 11 p to 6 a.
Yeah,
time frame.
2306.
So three out of 5 nights or 4 out of 5 nights we're having a second crew. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and that's what that additional 2 full timers would cover a minimum of 5, and then part-time staff would cover it every year too.
Okay. And then that was one of our goals last year that was identified, that second overnight staffing, right?
Yes.
So right now we're working our way towards the 7-day-a-week goal.
Yeah.
And I think that, in my opinion, I see that second overnight crew is sometimes it's I guess you call it fluff, like it doesn't get used a lot, but the only problem is once you get one call, your resources are gone. So I think, in my opinion, as a first responder, that security blanket that comes along with maybe a little bit more cost to that, it's worth it. Because in my mind, if I need an ambulance at my house and one call comes in beforehand at 2 in the morning, you know, you're out of luck. And I think that's worth a slightly inflated cost versus a third daytime, for example, where you know that you're going to reach those end over end calls throughout the day.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it last year, my mother-in-law was living with us. We had to call the ambulance at 11 o'clock at night. We had to wait for one from Canada because Victor was tied up. So we had the second crew back then, maybe they'd have been there in a few minutes.
Yeah. And I know, and I can certainly attest to the 95% call coverage, which I think it's more so important today than it ever has been. You guys are doing an excellent job with that. I know the call, there was a mutual aid call, not in the Victor district, but I overheard it actually in the county department a couple of weeks ago, and they went through 8 departments trying to find the ambulance company. And it was almost an hour for an ambulance to arrive. If you told me 5 years ago that that's happening in Monroe County, I would say you're crazy.
Yeah, no, I think you're observing a lot of the stress confluence in the system right now. We hear it in our county, we hear it in Monroe County.
Do you anticipate that the wage increases are going to continue to be demanded based on, you know, I came from a Monroe County EMS system years ago, where that was the wage driver, but now I'm hearing, as a paramedic, I'm hearing, you know, hey, you go out and work, not toward Rochester, but other places in our region, that they're offering wages that I had never even contemplated before as a paramedic. So do you think those will continue to drive increases in pay?
It's hard to be a soothsayer on that, Councilman. Some of the business journals that I'm reading are indicating that later this year we might see some rationalization in wages. There's so much dynamic in the economy right now, and just the stuff that's happening in the world. That's why I wish I could tell.
Sure.
We haven't seen any slowdown. We've had to increase our lower entry level positions just to compete with the outside.
Jim, the only other question I had, I think this is all looking relatively reasonable to me. The only question I have is outside the purview of this necessarily, but you know, we talk about the 68 call increase in Farmington, and I mean, they got a year-over-year increase. I mean, our comp plan and Victor calls out the residential and commercial build out being like the 2035, 2040. So we obviously have a long ways to run, and I think Farmington probably has further to run. What is that long-term plan as far as the Victor Firehouse coverage? At least from what I've seen, seems to be working fantastically. I think it's a great thing, but I do also see that as a, you know, a Band-Aid to bridge the gap to something in the future. You have a comprehensive plan on what your thoughts are with that?
So we don't have the plan yet. That's why we contracted with Fish. We are asking them to be our soothsayers and look out 5 or 10 years and tell us, what does the call volume look like? Where is the call volume going to be? And how should we be operating as a business? What should our staffing look like? When should we be looking at adding additional staff to cover calls? And what are the locations that we should be in? So I don't have that answer for you today. What I can tell you is we are investing in getting that answer and getting that answer from an outside consultant.
All right, excellent. The Victor Firehouse coverage has been a great addition to the service.
So Jim, looking at where the call volume is, are they also working with the municipalities as far as where the building will take place?
Jared, I'd have to defer to you.
Yes, long story short, they're doing what's called heat maps, you know, that you were touching on. I think the board level is deciding if they make a good financial push, where does it need to be and is it correct? And I think they are going to look at that aspect, and I just don't know whereabouts the funding necessarily is going to come from at this point. But when we make a move to break ground, that will come from this.
Yeah, and we'll obviously have, keep an open dialogue with both towns. This isn't something that we're going to do in a dark room by ourselves. So when we get information and we get their view of what we should be doing, that's an opportunity for us to have a dialogue with, hey, this is what the professionals are recommending the future looks like to us. What do you guys think?
I do appreciate you offering to share that because I think it's important. The communities, the governments, would probably have a good understanding of maybe land available or opportunities or working with our respective fire departments.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, we absolutely want to do this for the benefit of both towns.
Yeah, one of the developments that hasn't started yet, we don't even have an application, but Farmington Point in behind Prosecco's, there's a road design for back there. And a few years ago, we had the developer agree to give us 3 acres of land for a firehouse, but there's no reason that can't be a joint operation. It could be right there between Farmbrook and Auburn Meadows subdivision. 800 homes between the two locations, so it could be available in the future if he ever decides to develop that project.
And
And Halfway's Corner is being built right now. Yeah,
within like a mile radius. Majority of the residents. Like, honestly,
We initially had that done with Marco Group as well, near Lane Road. Part of that was a fire department ambulance and police station. We had, unfortunately, not transpired, but that was, we talked to you only about 5 years ago. Initially, we were part of that, little push of potentially having an ambulance there as well. We know, as Councilman says, we need to be in that direction, we need to be in this direction, right? And I think the firehouse has given us that quick dangerous fix, so.
would you actually give up Inspector Road, just go to 2, like maybe?
Oh, actually, everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table, yeah, Councilman, everything's on the table. We've asked Fish to baseline, where are we today? How are we doing today? Tell me what I need to improve on today. But the other thing we're asking is, hey, look, we're in a dynamic community. What's your recommendation for how we're positioned 5 years, 10 years from now, based on the growth that we're seeing? And those recommendations are going to be fiscal recommendations for us, staffing recommendations for us, geographic recommendations. And like I said, we don't have the plan, we're planning the plan. So I want this, and I think we all want this to be an open dialogue with both towns. We want to find the right balance. We want to provide cost-effective service, but we also want to make sure that we're providing excellent service to the residents, and not just the residents. We've got businesses and people coming in from out of town. See that we have good ambulance coverage, and it's top notch.
And Supervisor Marin and I met 2 or 3 times with Jim and some members of the board and Jared, and that was one of the things we discussed, was that everybody knows there's a value to that piece of property that you're sitting on if you decide to go 2 different places. So
Yep.
it's just one of the things we definitely everybody would be looking at.
We don't want to end up with yesterday's ambulance service trying to cover tomorrow's calls.
You guys work on like just like a capital reserve to just kind of stack away what you can for
Yes.
future buildings?
Any other questions?
Public, anybody? All right.
I want to thank the town of Farmington for hosting this very important meeting. Thanks, Farmington.
So we'll have this conversation on Zoom and we'll share it with the town of Vickers, so they can put it on their website. And for the residents of both towns to be able to see it in the future.
Supervisor Inglesby and Supervisor Marin, thank you very much, and both town councils. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody.